Do you
think they're an
think
armed
that Hamas
resistance
is a
group trying to
terrorist
fight for the
organization?
Do you think Israel's a terrorist organization? Genocidal intent. This is usually one of the hardest things to prove in a case of genocide. Not the case in Israel's genocide in Gaza.
So you're
according to
happy to
most
believe those numbers?
Of course I'm happy to
Why?
believe those numbers.
Israel needs to be held accountable and stopped immediately because it's the gravest crime against humanity that a state can commit.
Israel isn't interested in occupying Gaza in any sort of permanent way. That is not something we want. I'm
That's
not
why
a
I
Netanyahu
personally-
spokesperson.
Well, he should be tried at The Hague and put in The Hague. And
That's a
done.
different question.
I mean, he's committing
Different
genocide.
question. But you
He's
say you
committing
can't interfere in
genocide.
Palestinian politics, but you're very prepared to interfere in Israeli politics. Genocide, not a word to be used lightly. In recent months, a term which means to deliberately kill people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying said nation or group, has been levelled at Israel for its treatment of the war in Gaza. The Israeli government has repeatedly denounced the accusation, despite the ICJ ruling in January that it was plausible that genocide could be taking place. Over 32,000 Palestinians, mostly children, are believed to have been killed since the horrific attack on October the 7th. A new report from the United Nations says there are reasonable grounds that Israel has carried out acts of genocide in Gaza. This debate will rage on long after this war is over, as will whether or not Netanyahu and the Israeli government need to be held to account for their actions. Strong voices and opinions rage on both sides, none more fervent than those of my next two guests. I'm joined by the American-Israeli commentator Emily Schrader and the journalist and filmmaker Abi Martin. Well, welcome to both of you. Abi Martin, let me start with you. To me, genocide would mean the wholesale destruction of a people because of their ethnicity. That's how I've always understood genocide to mean. There is a internationally recognised 5-point guide to what is genocide. It says killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. By that definition, do you believe that what's happened in Gaza constitutes genocide?
I do, and I think that the fact that this debate is raging on shows that what Israel is doing is egregious enough. The fact that people are actually having a debate on whether or not it is genocide, like you said, the International Court of Justice has agreed that there's a plausible case for genocide. I think that you just clearly articulated several factors that Israel is, in fact, carrying out. The mental bodily harm and carrying about conditions to destroy a group of people. Clearly, the complete siege on Gaza, the elimination or the prevention, rather, of water, food, electricity, the prevention of aid, widespread preventable illnesses, killing people. Now we see 2 million people on the brink of starvation. Clearly, these are all intended to destroy a group of people. When you compound that with the indiscriminate bombing in the most densely populated places on Earth, I would absolutely constitute that as genocidal killing. And then peers compound that with the fact that there's genocidal intent. This is usually one of the hardest things to prove in a case of genocide. Not the case in Israel's genocide in Gaza. We have 5 pages just in the ICJ ruling that clearly lay out the explicit intent to carry out genocide. And I'll just point to 2. The Israeli president, who said shortly after October 7th that no civilian in Gaza is innocent, and that they should have overthrown Hamas. And because they didn't, they are essentially worth killing. And then you have the defense minister shortly after October 7th that these are human animals and we need to act accordingly, as he announced the complete siege of Gaza. So taking all that into account, I would absolutely constitute what is happening is genocide. And Israel needs to be held accountable and stopped immediately because it's the gravest crime against humanity that a state can commit.
OK. Emily Schrader, I mean, there's no doubt that if you study the direct quotes from some members of Netanyahu's cabinet, they are certainly speaking in a genocidal way. There's no question. There's enough of that being said since October the 7th. There's also a fact.
I actually would dispute that. I actually take issue with some of the comments that she made. For example, when we're talking about human animals, it was specific in the context, and if you understand Hebrew, you know that the context of this was speaking specifically about Hamas terrorists, who I would agree with that description. Of course, not all Palestinians are human animals, and Palestinian civilians, there are many innocent people. However, as President Herzog said, it is also true that there is a certain degree of complicity with many of the people of Gaza. Now, does that mean that they deserve to die, as she stated? No, of course not. But it's not the same thing as being innocent either.
But that would imply that there are no innocent people in the Palestinian side.
I don't think that it's true that there's no innocent people.
Isn't that
I
what
think
you just
that there's-
effectively said?
I think that there is a certain degree of complicity with many of the population.
How
As
many?
we see in the polls, according to their polls, a Palestinian conducted
many? How
poll,
many?
over 70% of the people in Gaza support the actions of October 7th. I wish it wasn't the case.
But Emily, you're
but
just
that is the
using
reality
that.
on the
You're just
ground.
using that poll. You're using that poll to paint all civilians as guilty. Do you realize that?
I am
when you do that,
absolutely
you're
not.
dehumanizing
I literally stated the
Palestinians.
opposite.
Yes, you
I
are.
said 70%.
You're saying that because
I said 70%.
Emily?
Of course there are innocent Palestinians.
So what does that mean?
But
what,
many-
you're rationalizing collective punishment and starvation of 2 million people, 1 million kids. That's what you're rationalizing by saying that 70% agree
over
with the actions of October
17,000
7th,
trucks
Emily.
of humanitarian aid have entered Gaza. Some of them that are being stopped right now on the border are actually being prevented from entering by Egypt, not by Israel. Israel has inspected them and approved them. Furthermore, the reason that aid isn't being distributed properly isn't because of Israel, it's because of Hamas, who has been taking the aid, shooting Palestinian civilians inside of Gaza. And this is according to Palestinian statements on social media in Arabic who have been speaking about this. And then taking that aid and selling it at double, triple, quadruple the prices of what would be the regular market for those items. So you cannot place this all on Israel.
But if you say that 70%...
Emily.
Hang on a sec, Abby. So 70% of people in Palestine are of this view. 50% of that population are under 18. They're children. So are you including large numbers of children in your assessment that Palestinians all believe this way?
I don't believe that the statistics of that poll, how they conducted it, included children. However, I don't know, so I would have to investigate that
It didn't
further.
include children, then that doesn't include half the people in Gaza. And that's,
According to whose statistics? According to the Gaza Ministry of Health, which is controlled by Hamas?
Half the population.
Because even this
Well, hang on.
30,000 number
Hang on,
is
I'm not-
coming from Hamas.
I realise that, but it hasn't been disputed by other agencies. And historically, the Hamas figures through the Palestinian Health Authority have been broadly proven to be accurate over time, which you know.
30,000 casualties, and they're claiming that none of them
But
are
that's not the-
combatants. How is that accurate?
That's
It
not
doesn't
the
even make sense.
That's not the number I'm talking about. The number I'm talking about is if half the population of Gaza is under 18, then saying that 70% of the people in Gaza have a view would have to include a lot of children, right? And if you don't include the children, you don't include half the population, well, then you're talking about a narrow number of people, comparative.
Sure, but you also have to consider the fact that Hamas is actively recruiting and indoctrinating youth with this very extremist jihadist ideology, and it's child abuse. It's an unfortunate reality that Palestinian children are dealing with
Why
there.
we're killing 12, 13,000 innocent children, whatever the exact number is superfluous to the general proportionate effect that so many kids have been killed.
I don't agree with these numbers
Well, how
at
many
all.
do you think have
I
been
would
killed?
dispute- We don't know. We do not know at this
And yet
point.
you're
but
very
you also,
happy on the
you
Israel
have
side.
to
Emily.
consider the fact
Okay, how many-
that there
how
are
many-
many of
okay,
them
let me ask you a
between the
question.
ages of 14 to 17
How many Hamas-
who are members of Hamas.
How
and
many
we have
Hama-
seen that proven.
How many Hamas terrorists have been killed?
See,
We
this
don't
is,
know,
oh
at
my
least
God.
9,000 though.
So you're
according
happy
the
to
most
believe
recent.
those numbers?
How many people believe those numbers?
You're happy to believe those numbers?
Of course I'm happy to
Why?
believe those numbers. Because Israel is a democratic country with the rule of law, and they hold people accountable when they violate those laws.
Right, okay. I mean, see, I think the problem with questioning the
Yeah.
numbers from the Palestinian Health Authority is that most other agencies, independent agencies, broadly agree that these numbers are about right. And if they're right, then 12,000, 13,000 children have been killed. And I would argue that it's very hard to see how the radicalization issue that the Israelis talk about will not be exacerbated by killing 13,000 innocent kids.
Right, and can I just address some of the points she made because they're all just egregious lies. I mean, she's a paid propagandist for the state of Israel. I think that we should
Kind
get
of
that
like
out of
you
the way.
being a paid
Egypt,
propagandist
Emily,
for Putin,
Emily,
or defending the Chinese Communist
Putin.
Party.
You know
or
what?
defending
Emily,
the Chinese
Emily,
Communist
Let her
Party
respond.
against
Let me
the
speak.
crimes
Let her
they're
respond.
committing
Emily,
against the people of
Emily,
Hong Kong.
let me
Emily, let
speak.
Abby talk.
Let me speak. Emily, let me speak. You just spoke just flagrant lies for the last minute. When I was on this show 10 years ago, I was actually speaking out against RT on Russia Today. Can you say the same? I'm a completely independent journalist. You are literally a paid propagandist for the Israeli military.
That
You just
is
had the audacity
libel.
to sit
I
down
have
with an
never
Israeli
received
military
any funds
official.
from the Israeli military, and I would be happy
so
to
you
sue
just
you
were
over
working
it.
for free? You literally said that you worked for the Ministry of Strategic Affairs, that you've worked with Stand With Us, which is an appendage of the Israeli government. Let me
No, it's
address
not.
the things that you just threw out there, which are lies. Yes, of course, they receive grants from the Knesset.
No, they don't.
Emily,
That is
you are
absolutely
lying.
false.
Egypt, Israel has... Look it up on the internet, Emily. I'm not sure why you're lying again,
I worked
but
there.
this is
I'm
what you
pretty
guys
sure
do.
I
You
know.
deflect, you
They
lie,
have
you
never
smear.
received funding from
Emily,
the
we
Israeli
can't just
government.
keep
It's not
speaking
legal.
over each other the entire
It's not
time.
legal. Then stop
Emily,
lying, Abby.
please let me
Stop
speak.
lying.
Israel has bragged the fact that Egypt just follows their orders. Okay, so we know that the aid is being prevented not only by fanatical Israelis who are blocking the aid trucks proudly, but from Israel themselves, Emily. And we know that almost as many civilians have been shot by Israeli forces just trying to scavenge for aid and food than civilians have died on October 7th.
That is blatantly
This is
false.
regular routine massacres that are happening of just desperate, starving Palestinians that are amassing to seek food. Is there anything that is more depraved than that?
That's
than to
absolutely
shoot
false. Earlier
desperate
this week, 7
people
million,
seeking
7
food.
million
You can't,
pounds of
you
food.
can't just keep
Food
saying
alone entered
Hamas.
Gaza. 7 million pounds
You-
in
and
one
then
day.
Let me try.
500
Let me try if I
500
can. Let me
trucks
try
per
and
day
bring
should
it-
be getting in.
I want to come
500
back
trucks
to,
per day.
Let me if I can, bring it back to the debate, which is about the genocide. On March the 26th, 2024, a UN human rights report called for Israel to be placed under an arms embargo on the grounds it has carried out acts of genocide in Gaza. Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the Palestinian territory, said in her report there were reasonable grounds to believe that Israel was carrying out 3 of the 5 acts, which I named earlier, defined as genocide. And she said these were killing Palestinians, causing them seriously bodily or mental harm, deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about the physical destruction of the population in whole or in part. So to that point, Emily, just forget the ad hominem stuff for a moment. On this, you've got the UN, you've got the ICJ, you've got increasingly the Americans actually trying to distance themselves from what's happening here. A growing sense that there is, if not full-blown genocide, a version of genocide happening here that meets quite a few criteria.
I mean, I think the definition of genocide requires intent to destroy a nation. And that is not what we're seeing. It's not what we've seen since day one. You have to remember the fact that this war was not
There
started
was a
by
cabinet
Israel.
minister who
Gaza's
actually said he would
destroyed,
be happy
Emily.
to drop a nuclear bomb on Gaza. That would have been the destruction
Well,
of the
there are
population.
plenty of stupid comments from many Israeli politicians that I don't agree
Right,
with.
but you said earlier that nobody on
But this is not
hang
the
on, you
same
said
thing.
earlier
We
that-
did not
hang on,
start this
Emily,
war.
let me point-
This is not a war we
Emily,
wanted. It
I
is not a
understand.
war we started.
I've made that point very clear.
Furthermore,
Let me
Israel
finish.
does have the ability to commit genocide, and they are not.
Let me
Why
just-
would we send 17,000 trucks
That's
of
such
aid?
an
Let me-
abusive,
Why would we be
crazy
sending
thing to say. You have a
200,000
gun to the head of Palestinians saying, we could
pounds-
commit
tons of
genocide
Hang
if
on,
we
don't all
wanted
talk
to.
over each other. I want to
That's
finish my
insane.
point about the cabinet member who said that was quite crystal clear in his genocidal intent. He thought it would be fine to drop a bomb, a nuclear bomb, on Gaza. You said earlier that nobody on the cabinet, nobody under Netanyahu from the start of his war, had ever espoused any genocidal thoughts or statements. He did that, guy.
I didn't say that no one in the
got fired over
government
it.
has said that. I said that the quotes she specifically mentioned are inaccurate.
Right, but what about the guy who got fired specifically for saying that about
He should
dropping a
have been
nuclear bomb?
fired.
Right.
He
so,
should have been
So
fired.
do you accept there have been people with that mindset on the cabinet?
I
in-
think
in
that
Israel?
there are people who have made all kinds of egregious statements on both sides, and I can give you a few examples of genocidal intent if you want from the other side,
Well,
because
how-
that's really the only
we can-
side
we can-
that has proven
We
genocidal
can come
intent.
to that. We can come to that. But on that point, do you accept then that there are people in Israeli government, albeit he was fired for it, who have espoused genocidal sentiment? They have.
I don't know of anyone who is in the current Israeli government
Well, no,
that
you
would
got
support
fired.
any form of genocide.
Right.
Has anyone
Look at
ever?
the
Of
ICJ
course,
ruling.
people have on both
5
sides.
pages.
Okay, Abby?
5 pages. Yeah.
5 pages of people,
5
including
pages.
social media posts of celebrities, including some of the people I know. That
Look.
doesn't qualify as a legitimate intent to carry out a genocide. They included one from a
Emily,
comedian
look
on
at the
there
Gaza
as well.
Strip.
Not to
Emily,
mention the fact that if we
Emily,
talk
look
about
at
the
Gaza Strip.
illegitimacy,
It's completely decimated. Every cultural aspect of life in Gaza has been completely obliterated to make it uninhabitable and unsurvivable for future generations there.
I mean, that is hard
That
to.
is
I mean, just to
genocidal,
say,
Emily.
that is hard to argue. When you look at what's happened in northern Gaza in particular, it's pretty much been leveled.
I've been there.
What-
I've seen it with my own eyes.
Why would anyone expect regular Palestinians to be able to go back to homes that don't exist? Where are they going to go?
Many of them already have started going back, and they need to reconstruct Gaza the same way that they needed to reconstruct Gaza after 2021. But they're going to have to do so together with partners, whether it's Israel, the United States, or other Arab nations, in a post-Hamas reality. And if we're talking about the problem in Gaza and how the Palestinians are suffering, you cannot remove Hamas from this equation. Hamas is the group that has been persecuting the Palestinian people as well.
Well, that is true, Abby. I don't think there's any
Emily.
question. I don't think there's any question Hamas has been suppressing and oppressing its own people. I think that they have become increasingly vocal in their desire to cause maximum damage to Israel and to Jewish people. They've said since October the 7th through their official spokesman that they will do this again and again and again. That actually is genocidal rhetoric. If you're pledging to destroy a people in as many numbers as you can, as often as you can, that is a form of genocide, isn't it?
Look, what precipitated even the origin of Hamas? Hamas didn't just grow out of thin air. I mean, it was precipitated by
but what about my question, though?
decades of brutal occupation and ethnic cleansing.
Yeah, but what about my
The question
question?
whether or not Hamas is genocidal in its intent, I disagree. And Emily's saying, look, Hamas is reacting. They're an armed resistance group trying to fight for
Well,
their
they're
liberation.
terrorists.
Abby, do you
I'm
think
not
Hamas is a
justifying
terrorist
anything that they've
organization?
done. The United States also called Nelson Mandela and the ANC a terrorist organization. I
you
think they're an
think
armed
that Hamas
resistance
is a
group trying to
terrorist
fight for the
organization?
liberation of Palestine.
Do you think they're
I'm
a
not going to
terrorist
sit here and give an
organization?
obligatory. Do you think Israel's a terrorist organization,
Of course
Emily?
not.
Do you think Israel's a terrorist
Of course
organization?
not.
Well,
Can you answer my question? Do
yeah,
you
let's
think
agree to
Hamas is a
disagree.
terrorist organization?
I already did. I already did.
Do you
Let me
think-
explain something
Do you
to
think
you.
that the acts committed on October 7th were legitimate? You think that gang rape, that
Do you think
mass
that the
rape,
acts that Israel
sexual
did that
violence is a method of
precipitated
war, that's
October
legitimate?
Hang on. Look,
Do you think
look,
October
again, don't talk over
6th,
here. Let me,
5th,
Abby,
4th,
let me,
8th,
Abby, let me
9th,
ask you.
10th?
Let me ask you the question,
Yeah.
which has made me infamous, famous, whatever you want to do. But do you condemn Hamas for what they did on October the 7th?
I'm not going to sit here and give an obligatory condemnation of Hamas. I
It was a
will
terrorist
give
attack
a
of appalling
condemnation of what I
magnitude.
think.
Surely on pure humanity
Piers,
grounds.
Piers, listen,
you cannot watch the
listen,
devastating
listen,
murder of 1,200
listen.
people and not say it was a despicable terror
What
act
begets-
and condemn the people who did it.
Look, listen, I'm not going to give an obligatory condemnation of Hamas. What I will do is
Will you give
condemn
any
the
condemnation
policies
of
that
Hamas?
precipitate violence. What I will do is condemn the roots of the violence, because inevitably you will have blowback when you deny millions of people basic human rights, when they're living under brutal medieval siege and barbaric military occupation, a fascist military occupation in the West Bank. Hamas doesn't govern the West Bank. Look at what Israel has done
But
in
you
the West
can't-
Bank
you
since
can't
October
condemn
7th.
Hamas for what
this
they
isn't
did on
about
October the
Hamas.
7th.
This is not about Hamas.
Well, it's all
I
about
condemn
Hamas.
what will beget
all about
violence
Hamas.
inevitably.
What are you talking
I'm not going to
about?
sit here and condemn Hamas.
The entire war.
I'm sorry?
This entire war has been because of what Hamas did on October the 7th. You could go back in
Absolutely
history.
not.
You can go back
Absolutely
in
not,
history
Piers.
and you can
Piers.
find arguments on both sides in the last 70 years. Right, I've had
you
the
cannot.
arguments
There's-
many times.
No, because
but you
no.
cannot
See, what
dispute
you're
that
doing,
this.
what you're doing is
What am I doing?
conflating and pretending like there are two equal sides. Oh, they've just been fighting for decades. There's always reasons on both sides to start the violence. No, that's not true. There's one side that's an occupying, colonizing force that continuously and violently expels and subjugates and brutalizes and terrorizes the other side. They are living under the boot of Israeli authorities, whether you're in Gaza and occupied completely militarily by the outside, or whether you're living under a fascist military dictatorship in the West Bank.
So if you
That is
believe,
the
okay,
root
so if
of
you
the
believe,
violence.
okay, so
That
let me
is
ask
the root
you,
of the
let me
violence.
ask
This
you
is
this.
75 years
Let me
of
ask you
ethnic
this,
cleansing
Abby.
and
All right,
apartheid.
I hear you. Let me ask you this: if you believe then that Hamas are a armed resistance, as you put it, and they have presumably then you believe what they did on October the 7th was justified, do you?
I didn't say that. No,
No,
absolutely
well,
not.
wouldn't that be
I'm
the
not sitting here justifying anything.
Isn't the
I'm
logical
just
extension of
explaining
your
that.
argument? If you believe they're an armed resistance and they are
That's not true.
they are doing what they're doing because they are responding to acts of terror by another side, surely you would say that what they did was justified. Or if it's not justified, what is it? You either condemn it or you think it's justified. I don't think you can sit in the middle, can you?
I look, I don't need to sit here and give a condemnation of Hamas. I can explain why Hamas exists. I don't have to support what they did. I don't have to justify or rationalize it.
Yes,
So
but
you're not gonna
silence
sit,
in the face of
as
rape
as
a
a person
method
who
of
studies
war
history
is complicity.
You can sit as a
Abby.
person who studies history. Emily, you're doing the exact same thing and you're projecting it on me. Okay, so do you condemn the actions of Israel for killing 13,000 children?
I don't accept that 13,000 children have been killed. That hasn't
Okay,
any,
see,
that
this
isn't
is the
anything that's
problem.
been verified.
This is the problem.
But it
A
depends on the
paid
context
Israeli
of what's happening.
propagandist
Do I condemn certain
sitting up there
actions of
and
the state of
denying
Israel?
Palestinians
Absolutely.
their reality?
Do I think Israel is always
You're
right?
denying
Of course
Palestinians
not.
their
Do I
reality.
think
This is why
everything
Palestinians have to
Israel has
show
Let's
their
all
done-
go
dead
over
kids
each
on
other,
camera.
please.
Do I think everything Israel has done, even in this war, is correct? No. There's no problem with saying that.
What has been wrong? What have they done?
I already said the same
Hang on,
thing about
Abby.
Hamas.
Hang on,
Emily.
Abby.
I already said
Hang
the
on,
same thing
Abby.
about Hamas.
Emily, tell me what Israel's done that's wrong in your eyes.
I think that should have been a priority from the beginning in order to plan a safe evacuation route before they implemented a military plan. I think that everything has been done too late.
Okay, Abby, what would you say Hamas have done wrong?
Again, I'm not going to sit up here. I don't even know really what happened.
You can't
on
find
October
How hard
7th
is
anything-
it
in
to
terms of-
condemn rape?
You can't find
Look,
anything to say they
all
did that
of
was
the
wrong?
lies that have been perpetrated. Look, Hamas killing civilians. I'm sure atrocities were committed on both sides on October 7th. I'm
On
sure
October
that many
7th,
civilians
atrocities were
killed.
committed.
I don't know.
What
I don't know
atrocities did
how
Israel
many
commit on
civilians
October
were
7th?
killed by Israel. Emily, I can't even hear myself talk because you just can't
All
stop
right,
talking.
let Abby speak.
There's so many lies that were put out by Israeli authorities that it's really hard to parse through. Look, I mean, we don't know how many civilians were killed in the crossfire by Israeli soldiers enlisting the Hannibal Directive. So, look, the mass rape,
What
the
about
beheaded
the-
babies, the ripping the babies out of pregnant women's stomachs. I mean, all of these things are such egregious lies that I really
What
just
about the-
can't sit
okay,
up here
what-
and condemn
Abby,
things that I don't even know what happened
What
or
about
not.
the atrocities which Hamas recorded and filmed themselves and then posted to the world to brazenly boast about what they were doing? What about that?
Look, nothing that Hamas did on October 7th compares to what Israel has done in
No,
response.
I'm asking
and
you a
what
direct
precipitated
question
October 7th.
about the fact that they
And
boasted about the
but
mass
the thing
murder
is, you
they were
guys
committing.
just make it all about October 7th, and that's what I'm saying. It all pales in comparison, Piers,
if you
to everything
can't
that
condemn
precipitated October
anything
7th and
Hamas has
everything
done.
that happened. I already said.
You
I
haven't
already
condemned
said
them.
killing civilians is wrong.
So what
Killing
they did,
civilians is wrong.
So what Hamas did on October 7th
So
was wrong.
what does that make what
hang
Israel
on,
has done?
Hang on, I'm trying to unpick your argument. So if it's wrong to kill civilians, were Hamas wrong to do what they did on October the 7th, given how many civilians were brutally murdered?
Are you doing the same thing to Emily? And if not,
Just asking,
why?
do you think it was wrong?
Why are you not sitting her
Do you
and
think it
picking
was
apart,
wrong?
is it wrong to kill 13,000
Why
children?
can't you answer a
Is it
simple
wrong
question?
to kill
Actually, he did ask
100?
this.
I already said it.
Was
Piers.
it wrong?
I'm not going to sit here. You're basically comparing Hamas to Israel.
No, I'm not comparing anything.
that's
You
really
said just
unfortunate.
now,
Yes,
unless I'm mistaken, you just said to me that the killing of innocent civilians is wrong. I then asked you, fairly self-evidently, I think, the question, that in that case, given that Hamas showed us on tape them killing civilians, innocent civilians, on October the 7th, do you accept that was wrong? Yes or no?
You saw the tape.
Yeah,
Piers?
they showed us.
You saw the tape of them killing innocent civilians.
Yes, they literally broadcast it to the world. Yes, we all did.
And so do Israeli soldiers
Fine,
in a
why can't
depraved
you
fashion.
forget
It's
Israel
like
for a
watching,
moment?
It's like watching.
Forget Israel for a moment.
It's like watching Nazis.
If it's wrong to kill
during World
innocent
War II
civilians, Abby,
on social
did-
media.
If it's wrong to kill innocent civilians, I'll ask you one more time. You haven't got to answer, up to you. But viewers are watching this and they know you haven't answered. You think it's wrong to kill innocent
I already
civilians?
answered. I think it's wrong to kill innocent civilians.
So what Hamas did was wrong.
She's not going to answer.
Well, let her answer if she wants to. Last time, I'm going to ask it. So.
I don't. I already told you I'm not going to sit here and condemn what Hamas did.
Right.
I understand why. I don't have to agree with what Hamas did, right? To understand
That wasn't my
why
question.
things
I just
happen,
asked you whether
to
the mass
understand
murder
why
perpetrated on
violence
October the 7th
erupts,
was wrong.
to understand why there's blowback for horrific policies of apartheid and ethnic cleansing. There's obviously inevitably going
October
to
the
be blowback
7th
and
was
violence from
blowback.
those policies. Yes, absolutely, it was blowback.
Right. But was it wrong?
100%.
Was it wrong?
Look, I don't know how much you want to just go around the mulberry bush like this.
I think it's a fairly straightforward question. I don't see how anyone can come on a show like this.
What Israel is doing
How
is
can
wrong.
you take
Can
part
you
in a
ask
debate like
Emily
this and
that? Is
say
what Israel
killing
is
innocent
doing to
civilians
kill
is wrong,
13,000
but I'm not going to
civilians?
tell you what Hamas did on October the 7th was wrong? It makes no sense, Abby. No sense.
I'm not going to sit here and condemn Hamas. I'm not
Okay.
going to do
It
the
made you- all right.
obligatory ritual.
I hear you.
Ritual that everyone is browbeaten into doing. I'm just not going to do it, Piers. I mean, what
honestly,
Israel is doing right now is
I think
committing
your
genocide.
I think your denial that what they did was a heinous act of terrorism is actually in its way as bad. I'm about to finish my sentence.
I said atrocities were committed.
Yeah.
And I think
they weren't wrong.
atrocities are wrong and killing innocent civilians are wrong.
So
Look,
Hamas were wrong to do
again,
it.
you're browbeating me into trying to
No, I'm
say
just asking
Hamas
for a
was
straightforward
wrong.
answer.
This was a horrific terrorist attack. I already answered you.
I think your
Piers.
failure to say that Hamas did something wrong is terrible. I think Emily's failure to accept that 12, 13,000 children have been killed is also terrible, right? I think that the denial going on both sides here, which I hear, is frankly appalling. It's
First of all, I'm
obvious.
not denying. I'm saying that we don't have the evidence yet of what the numbers are, and we
Well,
don't know
how
what the
many do you
breakdown
think it is then?
We don't know yet.
Well, we
but
do,
you also
because
have to remember the fact that what Israel is
as I
targeting.
said to you, Emily, the Palestinian Health Authority numbers historically have turned out to be proven to be
the
pretty
Palestinian
accurate.
Authority, the Ministry of Health has been instructed
That's-
explicitly
that's
by
not my
Hamas not
point.
to report combatants.
That's not my
The
point.
numbers are not
That's not
accurate
my
and they
point.
cannot be trusted.
As I've just said to you, historically, if you go and check historically, the Palestinian Health Authority, run by Hamas, their numbers have turned out to be broadly accurate. That is why they are being treated now as reasonably accurate numbers. There can be no doubt from the footage we've seen from the hospitals of endless children, from the bomb sites, endless children being killed, that there are thousands of children being killed. To try and deny that, to try and
I'm not denying that children are being killed. I'm not denying
but
that
you
there
don't
have
believe
been
the
many
numbers.
casualties.
And you're
I'm
trying to
saying
avoid-
we don't know the numbers yet. And we cannot state definitively, especially if the source is Hamas, that 13,000 children have been killed.
You have actually no idea that 9,000 Hamas terrorists have been killed.
According to IDF intelligence, yeah,
Right.
we do.
So you believe IDF intelligence, but you won't believe
A
the other
terrorist
side's numbers on
organization?
victims.
Absolutely. I would believe the IDF over a US and UK
They've
designated
released
Even if
terrorist
other-
organization
even if
that
other-
has been proven
even
to
if
lie
other
about this.
even if other independent agencies who corroborated the Palestinian Health Authority numbers, you still
What
won't believe
independent
them.
agencies? The United Nations?
Yeah,
This is not independent, as has been proven by this war itself.
and other
Members
aid
of UNRWA
agencies.
are actually active terrorists. Some of them took part in the October 7th massacre.
Right, so here's my problem with this
There's
debate.
no evidence for
Here's
that.
my problem with the debate for both of you. There is a level of denial on both sides, which I think people in the middle who don't have a horse in the race, right, who are looking at this from afar, they're aghast at the level of self-denial. They cannot believe, Abby, that you're not prepared to say what Hamas did was wrong. And they cannot believe, Emily, that on your side, you simply won't accept the obvious
The
fact
numbers
that
of Hamas?
thousands and thousands of children are
I
being...
didn't say that.
You won't-
Thousands of people are dying, but
How
we
many-
do not know the numbers. And no, I'm not going to accept the numbers from Hamas.
Right, so you don't have to then be accountable for the deaths of so many children.
I
Because you
disagree.
simply
I
say,
think Israel
I
should
don't
be
know what the number
accountable.
is, therefore I can't pass comment.
I don't agree with that. I think Israel needs to exercise as much caution as possible.
Should they kill fewer children?
If possible, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Do you accept they've killed
If
too many
possible.
children?
How would you?
I don't think that, yes, first of all, but I also
You do.
think...
Well, that's that's.
But I also think
okay,
it's
look,
important to note
we are
that
getting
many
somewhere.
of these casualties
We're getting somewhere.
are a result of
That
being
is
used as human shields.
Actually, what you just said is an important admission.
Okay, hold on. Can we
hang
talk
on,
about the
Abby.
human
I'm going to
shield
come
thing
to
really
you.
quickly?
But that's an
Yeah.
important admission,
Yeah.
actually, by Emily, that she thinks Israel has killed too many children. I think that is a healthy moment
Well, I don't
in
think
this
any
debate.
children should be killed.
Fine. You just said you think they're killing too many children. Don't
One
back-
is too many.
Fine, but it's not laughable, is it?
It's terrible.
Right. So I just think that until you can admit on both sides what's actually going on that we can all see with our own eyes, I think you don't get anywhere with this debate. Let me ask you this. We talk about genocide and we talk about how this all plays out at the end. How does this end, Abby? I mean, how do you actually get peace when we can't even have a debate without people screaming at each other? But we now know that a lot of Gaza has been leveled. I don't know if they can go back and live there, Gazans. I don't know how many more are going to get killed if Israel attacks the Rafah refugee camp in his efforts to finish off Hamas. I don't know these answers. What I do know is I find it very, very implausible that at the end of this, it simply all gets sorted out quite quickly and the Gazans go back to their destroyed homes, it all gets rebuilt, and they'll live happily ever after. So how does it end?
Right. I mean, well, no construction material has been allowed in for quite some time, so there is no rebuilding effort that's possible, especially when you've decimated the entire strip, demolished every aspect of civilian life, surgically striking doctors alongside their entire families, killing over 100 journalists, many in targeted assassinations alongside their entire families. I mean, really the best and brightest in Palestinian society in Gaza has been destroyed. IDF soldiers posting on TikTok that they're just blowing up mosques because they're bored, looting and pillaging women's lingerie. I mean, it really is depraved levels of sadism going on here. How does it end? A negotiated settlement immediately. I think that what Hamas is offering is not beyond the pale. It would be easy for Israel to comply with the demands. If we look at the 5-day truce that happened several months back, the Palestinian hostages that Israel's been keeping, they're not called hostages, but they should be because they're just political prisoners that are languishing in military detention. The vast majority of those political prisoners were not charged with anything. 30 of them were kids for throwing stones. So this is the kind of thing that we're talking about. When Hamas says release our hostages, that's who they're talking about. When they say the removal of Israeli troops from Gaza, I don't see how that couldn't be complied with. I mean, look, there should be a negotiated settlement. If you want the hostages back today, that could happen. And that's why there's thousands of Israelis protesting in the street.
Well, Hamas have just rejected the latest peace deal offering.
Well, okay, is it a permanent ceasefire? Because if you're just talking about a 6-week ceasefire, well then, yeah. I mean, Israel's saying they're just going to continue the genocide after 6 weeks. How is that
do you
something
think,
that's a concession
let me ask
for
you this
Israel?
before I go
Israel's
back to,
won at the
before
end
I go back to
every
Emily,
single
let me ask
time.
you this, Abby. Do you think Hamas should stay in power at the end of this?
Look, I'm whatever the Palestinians want, that's
Well, what do you
that's
think?
what they will do. I mean,
What do you
I think look, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the Palestinians of who their leadership should be. What I will say is Hamas isn't actually the most popular faction in Palestinian society. And Hamas is only the result of Israeli policy of brutal apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and occupation. That's why Hamas exists. Any type of Palestinian leadership that has arisen is a direct result of Israeli brutality. So I'm not going to speak on behalf of Palestinians and say what should or should not happen or who they should and should not elect. But I will say that Hamas is a democratically elected leadership of the Gaza Strip. I understand that there will be
let me ask you one more
and
question.
that inevitably
should
violence
Netanyahu
will
remain,
happen if these
Netanyahu
policies maintain in place.
Should Netanyahu remain in power in Israel after this?
No.
Oh, hang on.
I think that the Israeli people have spoken about Netanyahu, but I think that Netanyahu is the tip of the iceberg. To blame this all on Netanyahu and his so-called right-wing
simply asked,
government is to wash
should he
away
stay in power, is
the
my only question.
foundation of what Israel is.
Should he stay in power after this?
No, he's committing genocide. No.
So you're prepared to say to the Israeli people, no,
well, here's
your
the thing.
leaders should go.
Here's the thing.
But you're
the
not
Israeli
prepared to
people,
tell
the
Palestinian
Israeli people are out.
that their
the Israeli,
leadership should go.
But
Do you
here's
see
the thing.
Again, the inconsistency.
The Israeli people are out in the streets in the tens of thousands saying Netanyahu should go. It's
there
not
are many
because he's committing
Palestinians who
genocide.
want
They say that
Hamas to
he's
go
corrupt.
too, I'm sure. The
That
point
he's
is
corrupt.
you
There
made
are
a
many
big,
Palestinians
you
who
made a
want
big
Hamas to
deal
go.
of
Well,
saying
then
it
have
would-
an election.
You made a big deal of
Then
saying
have an
it-
election.
You made a big deal of saying it's not down to me to tell Palestinian people about their leadership, and then you immediately I give you the open door on Netanyahu. Yeah, absolutely, he should go. Totally inconsistent.
Well, he should be tried at The Hague and put in The Hague.
That's a different question.
I mean, he's committing
different
genocide.
question. But you
He's
say you
committing
can't interfere in
genocide.
Palestinian politics, but you're very prepared to interfere in Israeli politics. Let me ask you, Emily.
Well, because he's committing genocide.
Okay.
He's
That's
committing
a matter
genocide
for
and he should be
international
tried
courts.
and thrown in a prison.
It's a matter for international courts. Emily,
And
let me
that's
ask.
what international courts
Okay.
are. Right. That's what international
Actually,
courts are going
none
to
of them
find.
have actually spelled out crystal clearly it is genocide. It is moving that way, I have to say. Emily, let me ask you the same question. How does this end?
I mean, I think that Israel, as well as Palestinian leadership, needs to work together with other partners, especially in the Arab world, to help rebuild Gaza. Israel isn't interested in occupying Gaza in any sort of permanent way. That is not something we want. We withdrew from that territory. We do not want it. And I would like to see Palestinians be able to return to their homes safely and elect some form of government or leadership that is able to actually implement one day in the future some sort of peace process. And I think that involves working together with community leaders who are on the ground that are not affiliated with Hamas. Now,
Did you accept that anything going forward, which looks like a peace deal, would be a two-state solution, and that Palestine, in that respect, would be an identifiable state confirmed by Israel, and that they would no longer be dependent on Israel for the flow of food and water and fuel and all the other things which Israel has had some control over now for decades.
In the long term, of course, yeah. I do think
do?
that there needs to be some sort
Again, that's an
of
important-
solution.
important
The
concession.
problem that we're facing today,
Many Israelis don't.
I believe, is actually the radicalization element within Palestinian society, because Palestinian leaders don't have a mandate to lead, not Hamas and not Mahmoud Abbas. And we don't have a leadership that's able to implement any kind of peace deal in any borders. And when we have
I don't think Netanyahu's had any interest in a peace deal either. I think he's been quite happy watching Hamas and the Palestinian Authority at each other's throats since the early 2000s. I don't think he's ever shown any real desire to find peace. That's why
Well,
I think.
I'm
that's
not
why
a
I personally,
Netanyahu spokesperson.
I personally
so
think. I personally think both Israel
you are.
and the Palestinians they both need new leadership that actually wants to forge genuine peace in a two-state solution which offers security and safety to both sides.
Not
And
opposed
maybe
to
it will
that.
take time, but you know what?
But
I remember in Northern Ireland people saying it was equally intractable, and they eventually got there. You just need new leadership that knows what it's doing, who can actually believe in the concept of peace. We've got to leave it there. Abby Martin, Emily Schrader, thank you for a spirited debate. I appreciate it very much indeed.
Thanks.